This episode is proudly supported by Anchor Food Professionals. Whether you're a caterer, cafe operator, or chef running a commercial kitchen, everyone knows quality products are the foundation of successful dishes. Anchor Food Professionals is a trusted supplier to the hospitality industry and has built a stellar reputation thanks to their consistently excellent butter, cream, and cheese. As the food service business of Fonterra, Anchor Food Professionals is home to many well-known brands such as Perfect Italiano, Mainland, Western Star, and Bega, and is now an important part of the Australian food service sector. Anchor Food Professionals has a history of innovation and expertise in sustainable dairying that delivers a world-class product portfolio. If quality cheese, cream, and butter are important to your creations, head to anchorfp.com.au to explore the range.
The story we will hear today comes from the land of the Gunaikurnai and Barong people. Always was, always will be Aboriginal land.
We have so much natural resources around us, like for food and for wine. It's exciting. It's pretty exciting to see what the next 10 years will bring. Absolutely.
This is Over a Glass. I'm Shanteh Wale. In today's episode, we are in South Gippsland to speak with Lisa Jenkins from Fleet Wines. Together with her talented husband Justin, they are redefining delicious wines in unconventional and refreshing ways. Hi Lisa, thanks for joining me.
Hi Shanteh, thanks for having me.
It's always a pleasure to speak with you. I think that from the first moment I met you, I automatically knew you were someone I could talk easily to, because I think that little stint in restaurants and hospitality always kind of connects people. Tell me a little bit about how you found your way into wine.
I completely agree. I felt the same when I met you. I think it was at the Sydney wine show. I don't know how many years ago now, but so coming from a restaurant background and then moving into wines, I actually started my career as a chef. And, it kind of blossomed in a sense through the love of food and through the love of the industry, with a greater kind of look into wine, probably maybe 5 or 6 years into working in hospitality in kitchens. Back when I was working in kitchens, we're talking close to 25 years ago now. So there was actually quite a big divide between the front and the back. I think it's definitely feels though like it has changed with the times, and that there's much more inclusion from, the concept of what dishes go with what wines and that sort of thing. But when I sort of started in the kitchens, it was very much us against them. So my exposure to wine really didn't begin until I stepped out of the kitchen and travelled a little bit. I moved to the UK after I finished my apprenticeship, and, the exposure to the big, wide world really kind of was my first experience with wine. Didn't grow up with a wine family, or wine was definitely around, but not highly prized, and certainly not sort of talked about in any way that we would think with food and wine pairing or anything like that at home. It was just pretty basic. And my first experiences with wine was when I was travelling in Europe. So coming back to Australia, I kind of had taken off my chef's hat a little bit in that journey and worked front of house. I sort of realised that I probably didn't give as much credit to the floor staff when I was in the kitchen, because when I did those, travelling jobs and working in places just for a few months to get enough money to do my next little jaunt, next little trip somewhere amazing, which took me to sort of places like Turkey and Morocco and Portugal and Spain. I think everything's sort of so much easier when it's that close, when your base is London. But so coming back to Australia, I really wanted to pursue the wine side of hospitality a whole lot more. And that led me into looking into study. So I went down the WSET path that eventually led me to the diploma, which I finished in 2016. And along the way, I sort of also embarked on the Court of Master Sommeliers. I was working, as a wine buyer at the time and was heavily, focused on the wines of the world. That also led me into the judging circuit. Was able to do a scholarship with the Len Evans tutorial in 2011. And it kind of really all branched out from there. So I had an experience with my first vintage working for Mac Forbes in the Yarra Valley, Victoria, in 2007. So that was sort of my first exposure to what happens in a winery, but continued sort of working front of house in restaurants, honing my skills as a sommelier and as a wine buyer, getting all of that experience. The WSET diploma delved into viticulture and winemaking to a point. I found that I really loved that, and then decided to embark on a Bachelor of Viticulture with CSU. So I'm actually halfway through that, but have taken a little bit of a break because there's quite a bit going on at our farm, as you've seen, Shanteh, when you came out on a visit when you were doing some stuff with the Melbourne Food and Wine Festival. So, yeah, that's a long answer.
But I mean, you've done so much, so it is so hard to kind of. I don't even know how you fit all that in with what's going on in both your personal life and your work life. But tell me about how you met Justin and how Fleet Wines came about.
So Jess and I met in 2007 as well. So that's, it's creeping up to 20 years, which seems crazy. And however, when I think about it, we've accomplished so much. So it sort of does seem like it's close to 20 years in the same breath. But I still feel really young, young at heart at least. So we met working in a friend's restaurant. We both had full-time jobs elsewhere, and we were just helping a good friend out who'd opened a restaurant in Collingwood. And just hit it off like, sort of any young couple, pretty passionate about music, just plays. He was playing in a couple of bands at the time. He's a bass player. And we started our relationship, and I was immersed in learning about wine at the time. And I think that infectious kind of sense of sharing bottles and talking, and we loved going out to restaurants and eating as well. We're both working in hospitality, and just obviously had an effect on him as well. So we sort of both took that journey together in hospitality and with the wine side of things. Continued to kind of do our own separate studies. Just started working in cellars. So his first vintage was with Mount Langi, with Ben Haynes at the helm. And for Just, it was so interesting to see just how comfortable and how right this industry felt in terms of winemaking. He grew up on a farm and was working, on the farm and also with their family business from a pretty young age, through his teenage years. And so he got to Mount Langi and, knew how to drive a forklift, pressure hoses, and, he was, to coin the phrase, he was like a pig in shit, really, because he kind of knew exactly how to be. And I think, there's a romantic side about making wine that people they often say it to me, like, oh, it must be the best job in the world, thinking that you probably just sit around and taste wine all day. But the reality of working in a winery is it's a hell of a hard job. A lot of cleaning, a lot of, physical hard work. So, growing up on a farm and also my ability to work pretty hard working in kitchens as the start of my career, I think pretty much has held us in good stead for the longer hours and, the resilience and the drive that you need to work in wineries.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I think that's why hospitality, whether you're at the front or back of house, is so amazing, because you do learn some really useful skills that you can transfer to so many other jobs and philosophies in life. You really are at the kind of the start of your story for your own winery, and even though you've had this amazing history, tell me about why the move back or to Gippsland.
Yes. So in 2016, we were living in Melbourne. We just had our second child, so had a 2.5-year-old and a 5-month-old at home, and we were offered 2.5 tons of Cab Franc from South Gippsland, and just grew up in South Gippsland. So in terms of a regional fit for wanting to make our first wine, this was pretty much ideal. And, we didn't have very much money, to be perfectly honest. It was, the second child in. I had only been working part-time pretty much since the birth of our first child. And so it was a big decision to say, yes, let's commit to taking this fruit. We made the wine at a good friend of ours winery in South Gippsland, at Marcus Satchel's place from Dirty 3. And that was it was one of those opportunities that I look back on now and think, I'm so happy that we took that risk, that chance, and believed in ourselves back then, because you just got to start the wheel moving, and that motion and, that push and momentum really kind of can take off. And it sort of did with us. So starting with 2.5 tons in 2016, we did 6 tons in 2017. We outgrew the winery space with Satch. So in 2018, we moved our whole kind of small operation to Rob Hall's winery in just on the edge of Yarra Valley. And so we grew to 18 tons in 2018, which was, triple what we'd made the year before. So, we're biting off big chunks at every opportunity that we could to make this a viable business, whilst still working for other people as well, and, still having 2 very small children at home. So I'm smiling as I'm telling you the story, because I sometimes don't even believe how I got through in all of those early years of what we were trying to achieve and what goals we'd set in front of ourselves. And we stayed at Rob's place until essentially 2020. Our 2020 was the last harvest that we crushed at Rob's place. And then an opportunity came up to lease a vineyard in Leongatha. And it's an older vineyard, highly prized. A lot of people were interested in the fruit and have made wine from this vineyard over the years. It was set up in 1990, so one of the more established vineyards in the region. And for its size, there's lots of tiny little vineyards in South Gippsland and Gippsland in general, and this was one of the larger vineyards. So for us, this was our ticket to start really establishing ourselves in the place where we knew that we wanted to be. Just growing up in the region and knowing the fame of Bass Phillip and why the Pinots are so interesting and why it's so well suited to this little sub-region. on this particular kind of soil type, which is, the old volcanic red basalt soils. So we then, from 2020, had made our mark in 2019. I should just skip back, actually, because we'd been looking for property. We'd been living down here since the summer of 2016 going into 2017, but just renting a house in Inverloch whilst we were, really hunting for a property or a farm. I think in a lot of ways we always knew that we'd be starting from scratch, because the established vineyards were either hobby farms, really small, nothing that you could grow yourself into or establish, with more plantings. So, and then you've got a historic kind of potential problem with older vineyards, whether it be trunk disease or old infrastructure with wires and posts, needing to be replaced. So starting from scratch did definitely seem like the path forward for us. And in 2019, we did find a property that was like the Goldilocks. So it's 21 hectares, and it was just grazing land. So we've essentially started the establishment of vineyards. We've so far planted 4 hectares. We've built our winery and we built our house. So, and on top of that, actually, this is something that we're really quite proud of, is we've planted over 10,000 native trees on the farm. And that's a bigger story, a longer probably story, but it leans back into how we want to farm and the importance of biodiversity in agriculture. So, if your base of farming is organic philosophy, you need to have trees, you need to have wildlife corridors for birds, bugs and bees to live and, thrive in. And the property had none. So that the goal for our property would be around 25,000 natives. So we're close to halfway.
Incredible.
Which is, yes.
Incredible. I mean, anytime you wake up one day and you're just having one of those down days, I want you to remember that you've built a winery, created an amazing cellar door, planted your own vines, planted native trees, all while having a family of your own. It is quite remarkable. And I mean, you put a lot of other people to shame. Tell me a little bit about when, you first came back to Gippsland. What was it like? What did you see from Justin being back in his kind of childhood area? Did he light up inside? Had it changed a lot? What was his thoughts about moving back to Gippsland and what it had become?
I think for just, growing up in rural Victoria, he could not wait to get out. When he was 18, he left. He actually went to art school. He ended up doing a fine art degree at VCA, could not get out of here fast enough. And I think it was a very different time back then as well. Just as got a very big core of him that is arts driven. He loves the artistic kind of side of life, whether that's music or actually physically making art. And it wasn't, there definitely wasn't a sense of encouragement for that in the region at the time. He struggled and probably got picked on, to be perfectly honest, by lots of people around here, because it just wasn't the done thing. You become a builder, or you just keep playing footy, and he had long hair, dreadlocks, and loved to surf and skate and play music. So he couldn't get out of here fast enough. And I think those experiences, when you do branch out and have more of a life experience, when you do feel that sense of wanting to come back to the place, and especially come back home, what you're doing is you're bringing back all that rich culture and new learnings with you. And I think that actually really, for a small community, only enriches that community as well. And he's got a number of friends that he grew up with and went to school with who've all done a similar thing, gone off and travelled and lived elsewhere, whether that's overseas or Melbourne, Sydney, but have decided to come back when they're raising their family. So there's a bit of a cohort that's come back, and for me that's been brilliant, because being a little bit of on the outsider, not having that connection and community from growing up here, having people who are also have travelled and are interested in a wider range of things as well is a nice community to be around. And when we first made that move, I remember it was actually my dad who said to Just, so we bought a house in Melbourne, and it's actually the reason that we were able to buy the farm was because this, the property that we had in Melbourne, we were able to sell it at a crucially good time, just pre-COVID. And that was how we bought the farm. But my dad had specifically said to Just, please don't sell the house in Melbourne for at least 2 years for when you have moved to Inverloch and to South Gippsland, to just in case Lisa changes her mind, because she might not enjoy it. She might want to come back to the city. And I had those fears as well. And I think having young children and moving into a community, you sort of already have a bit of a network because of the school side of things, and moving into children making friends and then making friends with the parents. And so there's definitely a bit more of an in when you've got kids moving to a rural Victoria or rural place. And I found that really helpful. And I think anywhere you go, you kind of find your people, whether that's through, I joined a book club because I love reading, and there's a lot of other people out there that do as well. So, kind of, yeah.
I think you're spot on. I was amazed at the restaurant and bar offerings, the incredible food, the culture there. And it really, it has leaked from Melbourne into Gippsland, being such a large place. I was blown away by this real movement of Dan Sims would call it Gipsters. And it really felt like there was such established diversity of culture throughout the region. What does Gippsland offer for a young family life, and what do you think the future holds for Gippsland?
I completely agree. I think that there is an energy and a movement happening, and it's sort of based around Warragul, South Gippsland, and a little bit coastal, but Gippsland is huge. So I sort of talk about our little sub-regions in a sense as its own bubble, because there's some cool stuff going on in East Gippsland as well, like, leading the charge is Sailor's Grave Brewery and Lightfoot as well. But they're sort of almost really quite isolated in that part of Gippsland. For us, I feel like the balance between nature and enough activity is incredible. Like the coastline along the Bass Coast is one of the best in the world. Actually, Squeaky Beach just got named best beach in the world in one of the reviews, I think, for this past year, which is part of Wilson's Promontory. And like the coastline along there is absolutely stunning. So if you're into the nature side of things, Gippsland has so much to offer within that. We're sort of getting there with some restaurants and some other food offerings, but it's slowly. I think there's a few things on the horizon, and not all the community is interested in having so much change, and that's a real shame if there's blockages along the way. But I think overall there is a big push, and that's come from, and like the guys in there's a group of people in Warragul who've just opened a restaurant. I think you might have gone there, Messmates, and they grew up in the region. They grew up in Warragul and have worked in some of the best places in Australia and abroad, and have come back and chosen Warragul to set up one of the coolest little restaurants that would sit in any scene in Sydney or Melbourne completely fine, but they've chosen to come back here. And I think that experience and exposure that they've had abroad, or leaving the country town, and then but wanting to bring some of that cultural reference back and to broaden the spectrum of what is on offer. And we have so much natural resources around us, like for food and for wine. It's exciting. It's pretty exciting to see what the next 10 years will bring. Absolutely.
I think you are so correct. And when I think of Gippsland, I think of the natural beauty, which is so different in every place that you go. But then I also think about the cheese and the wine I can drink, and it's all I need, like really. And maybe it's also the season of life I'm in as well. But I love bars and I love going out, but man, give me a beautiful view and a cheese and a glass of wine in nature and I'm set.
Yeah, agreed.
Lisa, it's been such a delight. I love chatting to you. I hope one day that we can cook a meal together sometime and open some bottles of wine, but I really appreciate you spending some time with me today.
I'd love that too. Yeah, thanks, Shanteh. Thanks for inviting me on.
The vast land of Gippsland has everything you could ever want in your glass, and yet the diverse municipalities have their own identity and culture. It's a wondrous land you just have to taste and see to believe. But be warned, you might never want to leave. Visit winegippsland.com to find out more. This is Over a Glass. I'm Shanteh Wale.